After the end of his marriage, Ethan had learned to move through the world as if coated in a thin layer of invisibility. Each day felt measured, deliberate, almost mechanical, waking, working, returning to his small apartment, repeating the motions as though by doing so he could avoid confronting the hollow ache that lingered beneath routine. The city around him moved with its usual vibrancy, but he existed parallel to it, detached. He had loved once, and that love had ended in quiet devastation, leaving him uncertain not only of the future, but of the very capacity of his heart to trust again. Nights were the hardest. The apartment echoed with the absence of shared laughter, familiar footsteps, and the warmth of a hand in his. He avoided friends, fearing their well-intentioned questions, and conversations with strangers felt shallow, a reminder of the emotional distance he had built around himself. Ethan's life, once full of connection, had shrunk into a careful survival. It was on an unusually warm autumn afternoon that his life began to shift, though he did not recognize it at first. He had wandered into a small, independent bookshop he had never noticed before, drawn not by curiosity, but by the need to escape the sudden chill in the wind. The scent of old paper and polished wood, the faint murmur of classical music through hidden speakers, and the gentle clutter of shelves created a strange sense of safety, like a cocoon for someone too cautious to leave the shadows of their own grief. And then he saw her, Isabelle, kneeling in a quiet aisle, her hair catching the sunlight that spilled through the front window, scanning the spines of books with a delicate attention that seemed almost meditative. She did not look up immediately. She seemed absorbed entirely in the moment, and Ethan, who had long stopped noticing small details, found himself holding his breath, observing the calm certainty in her gestures. Their first conversation was accidental, simple, and utterly transformative in its subtlety. A book slipped from her hand, landing softly at Ethan's feet. He bent to retrieve it, handing it back without speaking, and their eyes met for the first time. There was no dramatic spark, no immediate declaration of connection. But there was a recognition, an awareness in each of them that beneath the ordinary moment, something important had begun. She thanked him with a quiet smile that held no expectation, and he, unaccustomed to human warmth, felt a flutter of something he had thought long buried. He walked out of the shop that day carrying nothing but a borrowed sense of curiosity and a realization he could not yet articulate. He wanted to see her again. Over the following weeks, their encounters became intentional rather than accidental. Ethan found himself returning to the bookshop, ostensibly to browse for novels, but more honestly to catch a glimpse of Isabelle, to hear her soft laughter when she discovered a title she loved, to witness the easy grace with which she moved through her days. They spoke of trivial things at first, recommendations, authors, the weather, but gradually, the conversations deepened, flowing effortlessly into reflections on life, loss, and quiet ambitions. Isabelle shared stories of her own past, including heartbreak and family struggles, and Ethan found in her presence a strange mixture of familiarity and discovery. He could be honest without fear, yet still feel the thrill of encountering something new. It was during one evening stroll along the river that Ethan realized his perception of life had begun to shift. They walked side by side, leaves rustling underfoot, the city lights reflecting off the water like fragments of gold. Isabelle spoke of hope not as naive optimism, but as a deliberate act of attention, noticing beauty, embracing risk, and allowing oneself to feel fully even after loss. Ethan listened, realizing that he had been surviving, not living, for years. In her, he saw resilience that was neither flashy nor performative. He saw courage hidden in ordinary actions, in moments of quiet choice. And for the first time since his divorce, he imagined the possibility of his heart being full again. As autumn deepened, Ethan and Isabelle's friendship blossomed into something more intricate. They shared long conversations over coffee, quiet dinners where words were often unnecessary, and weekends exploring hidden corners of the city, from flea markets to galleries to silent parks where the world seemed paused just for them. Ethan began to notice small changes within himself. Laughter returned, not forced but spontaneous. He wrote again, rediscovering fragments of prose and poetry he had abandoned. He even allowed himself to dream of a future beyond routine. Isabelle did not pressure him, nor did she offer easy solutions. Her presence simply provided space for trust, for curiosity, and for the cautious reawakening of love. Then came a rainy day, the kind that so often would have left Ethan hidden indoors, avoiding the world. But Isabelle had invited him to a small, neglected botanical garden, promising an unexpected beauty. They wandered through puddled paths beneath umbrellas, surrounded by the muted greens and oranges of late autumn. The rain was not a nuisance but a companion, soft and rhythmic, framing the conversation and the tentative touches of hands that began to feel natural. In that garden, Ethan realized that he had not merely recovered from loss. He was being given a second chance at life itself, one that demanded courage, presence, and a willingness to surrender to joy despite past pain. Months passed, and their connection grew in complexity and depth. Ethan began to recognize patterns within himself that had kept him closed off: avoidance, fear, a persistent voice insisting that life's second chances were too risky. Isabelle mirrored neither judgment nor impatience. She modeled patience, care, and the quiet power of consistency. He realized that her influence was not transformative in a dramatic sense. She did not rescue him, nor did she dictate his choices. Instead, she restored what had been hidden, the understanding that life's beauty could not be earned through careful safety, but through intentional engagement and trust. Winter arrived slowly, brushing the city with frost and muted light, and Ethan found himself increasingly aware of the subtle rhythms that had once gone unnoticed in his life. Each morning, he watched the way breath crystallized in the cold air, the way street lamps flickered with the faint hum of electricity, the quiet patterns of pedestrians navigating icy sidewalks with tentative grace. These observations, previously trivial or invisible, now struck him with meaning because Isabelle had taught him to notice life in ways he had long ignored. Their friendship had grown into something both comforting and invigorating, a connection that demanded honesty and presence rather than performance or expectation. He began to allow himself to feel fully, not merely to endure. And yet, even as the warmth of her influence penetrated his routines, he felt the ghosts of the past lingering. Memories of laughter that had gone silent, of promises broken quietly by absence, of the intimate familiarity that once existed and would never return. Those memories no longer paralyzed him, but they whispered lessons about vulnerability, about the courage required to open one's heart again, and about the necessity of choosing to embrace life even when fear whispered that it might all end in loss once more. One evening, they visited a small art exhibition, tucked away in an industrial loft transformed into a gallery, where the walls held abstract paintings in muted blues and grays, each brushstroke whispering stories of struggle and hope. Ethan stood beside Isabelle, studying a canvas that seemed to mirror his own journey. Dark patches interrupted by streaks of light, chaos contained within deliberate order. He realized then that he was no longer observing life from the edges. He was participating in it, feeling the textures of experience, allowing himself to be affected, moved, and reshaped. Isabelle, standing quietly beside him, made no dramatic declarations, but her presence was anchoring, a constant reminder that trust could be rebuilt, that hearts could be mended gently over time, and that love's power often lay in its consistency rather than in grand gestures. When she finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, Commenting on the resilience implied in the painting's contrasts, Ethan felt an unexpected surge of gratitude. It was not merely the art he was responding to, but the mirrored reflection of a life being restored through the quiet influence of another human being who believed in the possibility of second chances. As their days together multiplied, Ethan noticed how the ordinary details of life began to accumulate new meaning. He no longer considered the commute to work as merely a path to obligation, but as a chance to observe the world, the way sunlight fractured across glass towers, the quiet diligence of a barista preparing coffee with methodical care, the subtle shifts in weather and light that marked the passage of hours. Isabelle, with her attentive and grounded manner, had trained him, almost imperceptibly, to inhabit each moment with curiosity and presence. And the more he practiced, the more the internal fog of grief began to lift. He found himself laughing again, sometimes spontaneously, often at the smallest and simplest of things: a child tugging at a parent's coat, the way pigeons fluttered awkwardly across wet pavement, or a stray phrase in a book that resonated with a long-buried memory. Yet alongside these joys lingered moments of introspection. He often paused in the quiet of his apartment, notebook in hand, reflecting on the ways he had once closed his heart and questioning how much courage it truly required to begin again, fully, without reservation or expectation. One particularly long evening, they found themselves sharing a quiet dinner in a small, dimly lit bistro tucked down an alley, the kind of place where the hum of conversation blended with soft music and the clinking of glasses into a comforting rhythm. Ethan, who had once avoided such intimacy, found himself opening up about the raw edges of his past, the bitterness that had lingered after the end of his marriage, the quiet loneliness of empty rooms, and the subtle self-doubt that had haunted him for months afterward. Isabelle listened without interruption, her eyes steady, her expression open, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt that his vulnerability could exist without judgment. Her responses were not designed to soothe him artificially, but to honor the truth of his experience, to validate both the pain and the courage inherent in surviving it. In that moment, he realized that love could be restorative, not through rescue, but through recognition. The simple act of being seen, truly and without pretense, could catalyze change that no grand gesture or dramatic declaration could ever achieve. As winter deepened, the quiet ritual of their companionship became something Ethan depended on, though not in the sense of neediness, but in the sense of grounding. They explored old libraries, wandered through snow-dusted streets, and shared long afternoons discussing philosophy, literature, and their hopes for the future. Each interaction chipped away at the protective walls he had built around his heart, allowing trust to grow in its place. He began to write again, producing long passages in his notebook that reflected both the shadows of his past and the emerging light of his present. These writings were not for publication, at least not yet, but they were evidence that he was reclaiming a life he had once considered irretrievably lost. And yet, for all the comfort that Isabelle provided, Ethan understood that healing required his own commitment, his own willingness to face grief and fear without retreating. Love, he learned, could illuminate the path, but it could not walk it for him. Spring arrived, brushing the city with new warmth and lengthening days, and with it came a subtle transformation within Ethan that even he could not entirely define. He no longer measured his days merely in obligations or routines. He began to notice the colors of the sky at dawn, the intricate patterns of shadows on old brick walls, and the quiet determination of people navigating their lives with invisible burdens. Isabelle had not altered his world with grand gestures or proclamations of love. Instead, she had shown him that presence and attention were enough to cultivate meaning. Their relationship deepened, shifting from companionship to the tentative stirrings of romance. Not the fiery, instantaneous kind, but something steadier, more rooted in mutual respect, shared vulnerability, and the gradual rebuilding of hope. Each conversation, each small touch, each shared laugh carried significance because it was chosen, deliberate, and authentic. And in that authenticity, Ethan discovered the faint but undeniable sensation of joy, tempered with the knowledge that joy is always worth risking, even after profound loss. One chilly afternoon, Ethan and Isabelle found themselves wandering through a nearly deserted botanical garden, the skeletal branches of early spring trees reaching skyward as though probing for warmth, while puddles mirrored the soft, gray light overhead. They walked side by side, occasionally brushing hands, sometimes speaking, sometimes letting silence speak for them. Ethan realized that for the first time in years, he could breathe without the constant pressure of grief pressing down on him. Isabelle did not rush him, did not question his lingering hesitations, but simply allowed their shared presence to teach him that life could feel expansive again, even after profound loss. As they paused near a small fountain, water spilling rhythmically over mossy stones, she spoke softly about her own experiences with heartbreak and resilience, weaving stories of recovery that were neither heroic nor self-congratulatory, but honest and grounded in the quiet strength of survival. Ethan listened, absorbing the rhythm of her words as one absorbs sunlight after a long winter, and in that listening, he understood something crucial. Love after loss is not a matter of replacing what was, but of opening a space where the heart can choose to grow again, not in spite of pain, but alongside it. The days that followed were filled with a mixture of ordinary and extraordinary moments, each carrying its own weight of significance. Ethan found himself noticing subtle shifts in his own behavior. He laughed more freely, lingered over cups of coffee without feeling rushed, and allowed himself to linger in conversations without turning them into assessments or strategies. His apartment, once a space of muted sorrow, began to feel alive again. He rearranged books, opened windows to invite the spring air, and even began leaving small flowers on the kitchen counter as a quiet reminder that beauty could return. Isabelle, quietly observing, never commented directly on these changes. Yet her presence was a mirror, reflecting back the parts of Ethan that had been buried under grief and self-doubt. One evening, as they shared dinner in her modest apartment, the sunlight slanting across the room, Ethan realized that he was no longer counting the days he had been alone, but instead measuring the quality of the moments he was choosing to inhabit fully, with attention, intention, and openness. It was during one of their long evening walks, beneath the soft glow of street lamps and the occasional flicker of passing car headlights, that Ethan finally confronted the weight of his past more directly. He spoke of the quiet devastation he had carried after his divorce, of the moments when he had doubted whether he could ever feel trust, intimacy, or joy again. Isabelle listened without interruption, her calm presence offering a safe harbor for truths he had long feared admitting aloud. Then she spoke, not with platitudes, but with the quiet conviction of someone who had walked through her own shadows. She reminded him that grief does not vanish with time alone, but transforms when acknowledged and honored, and that the capacity to love again is not diminished by loss. It is strengthened by courage. Ethan felt an unfamiliar warmth spread through him, not the flush of fleeting attraction, but the steady glow of connection, recognition, and the awakening of hope that had been dormant for years. For the first time, he did not feel fear in his chest, only possibility. Weeks turned into months, and Ethan's life began to unfold in ways he had never anticipated. Work, once a source of endless stress and monotony, became a platform for creativity, as he allowed himself to pursue projects that he had long shelved, believing them impractical or unworthy. He wrote again, not for validation, but for the clarity of expression, the joy of externalizing thoughts and emotions that had been confined for too long. Isabelle remained a quiet companion in this transformation, celebrating achievements without pomp and offering encouragement without pressure. Together, they explored galleries, bookshops, and parks, but also simple rituals, shared breakfasts, the slow unfolding of Sunday afternoons, and conversations that meandered from the philosophical to the mundane. Each act, each shared moment, felt infused with intention, as though life itself had slowed down to grant them the chance to truly inhabit it. And Ethan realized that happiness, long feared, long denied, was not a sudden eruption, but a careful cultivation, nurtured by presence, reflection, and the gentle influence of someone who saw him fully without expectation. Then came the moment that altered everything. Isabelle received a significant job offer abroad, an opportunity to work on an international restoration project that she had long dreamed of. The news arrived on an ordinary Tuesday, but the implications were immense. For Ethan, it was both a thrill and a terror. The possibility of separation, of distance, of navigating uncertainty while clinging to the fragile bloom of their emerging love. Yet even in his fear, he recognized the truth of what they had been building, a love that was not rooted in possession, but in support, courage, and trust. Rather than clinging or pleading, he chose to respond with honesty and generosity, encouraging her to pursue the opportunity while acknowledging his own apprehension. It was a test of resilience, of faith in connection, and of the realization that the strength of love lies not in proximity, but in its capacity to inspire growth even across distance. The months of physical separation were transformative in unexpected ways. Ethan continued his creative work, using the solitude to delve deeper into his own thoughts, emotions, and ambitions. He learned that the absence of daily presence did not equate to the absence of intimacy. Instead, it required new forms of communication, patience, and trust. They spoke on late-night calls, shared the minutiae of daily life, and occasionally, through the screen of a laptop, glimpsed the landscapes that now formed Isabelle's new reality. Distance revealed vulnerabilities, but it also revealed strength. Ethan discovered that he could navigate his own life fully, while still holding love in his heart. And in Isabelle's presence, though often virtual, he felt the reaffirmation of hope, the recognition of authenticity, and the quiet assurance that sometimes, love does not rescue or transform instantly, but gradually nurtures the courage to live more fully, more bravely, and more openly than before. By the time spring fully returned, Ethan had begun to understand the subtle, almost imperceptible ways in which love after loss transforms a person. He no longer carried his past like a chain, though the memories remained, faintly echoing, reminding him of the fragility of trust and the pain of absence. With Isabelle, he had learned to inhabit the present without fear that it would crumble, to feel joy without the expectation of loss, and to embrace the extraordinary within the ordinary. Each interaction, whether it was a shared laugh over a clumsy remark, a silent observation of the city from a quiet bench, or the soft brush of hands while reaching for the same book, carried a weight of significance because it was deliberate, chosen, and grounded in authenticity. He noticed the way his heart no longer recoiled at intimacy, how he allowed vulnerability to surface without fear of judgment, and how he could hold grief and hope in the same space, balanced delicately, as though the two had always belonged together. Isabelle's presence, consistent yet unobtrusive, offered him the gift of witnessing someone else's courage, and in reflecting that courage back to himself, he felt his own grow stronger, more resilient, more capable of trusting in the unpredictable currents of life and love. One rainy evening, the kind that would have previously driven him indoors to sit alone with muted frustration and quiet bitterness, Ethan found himself standing with Isabelle under a small awning outside an old cafe. the sound of water tapping against metal framing the soft murmur of their conversation. They discussed everything and nothing: literature, travel, memories, the fleeting beauty of fleeting moments. And in the rhythm of shared words, Ethan felt an unfamiliar lightness, a sense of being fully awake, fully engaged, and fully alive. He realized that he had been existing for years, moving through time as a spectator of his own life, never daring to step fully into the texture, the messiness, or the unpredictability of human experience. Isabelle did not command or direct this awakening. She simply reflected it, a quiet mirror for his own re-emerging capacity to care, hope, and love. And in that reflection, he saw not just the potential for romantic fulfillment, but the renewal of his very self. A second chance not merely at connection, but at life lived with authenticity, courage, and intentionality. Over time, their relationship evolved into something both profound and ordinary, a paradox that Ethan came to treasure. They did not need grand gestures or constant excitement to sustain their connection. It was grounded instead in consistency, shared attention, and the deliberate choice to show up for one another each day. Morning coffee became a ritual of presence rather than necessity. Walks through parks and quiet streets were no longer mere movement, but an exercise in witnessing, and even disagreements became moments of growth rather than conflict. Ethan began to understand that love's deepest power often lies not in the extraordinary, but in the cumulative effect of countless small, authentic actions. The way someone listens fully, the way a touch conveys reassurance, the way silent companionship affirms presence. He could now integrate joy, grief, memory, and hope into a single coherent existence, feeling each fully without fear that embracing one would diminish the others. The world, once a place that reminded him of absence and loss, began to feel alive again, rich with possibilities and subtle beauty he had long overlooked. Then came the moment of decision, a test of the trust, courage, and growth they had cultivated together. Isabelle's work abroad was ending, and the choice lay before them: to continue their lives in parallel, separated by geography and circumstance, or to commit fully to building a shared future. The decision was not simple. It carried the weight of past disappointment, the cautiousness born from loss, and the lingering questions of whether second chances could endure. Ethan, reflecting on the transformation he had undergone, understood that love was not measured by ease or certainty, but by the willingness to act despite fear, to embrace risk not recklessly, but intentionally. They talked long into the night, exploring fears, hopes, and visions for the future, recognizing that true intimacy required transparency, patience, and the courage to let go of old patterns of avoidance. In the quiet hours before dawn, Ethan made the choice not based on safety, comfort, or obligation, but on the deep resonance of alignment with Isabelle, with his own emerging self, and with the possibility of life fully lived. The day they reunited in the city after months apart was neither cinematic nor dramatic, yet it felt monumental in every internal measure that mattered. Ethan waited on the sidewalk outside the train station, the hum of city life surrounding him, heart alert yet steady, the weight of anticipation tempered by a profound sense of clarity. When Isabelle appeared, smiling through the winter light, it was not simply joy he felt, but relief, gratitude, and an awe at the quiet miracle of two lives converging once more with intentionality and awareness. They embraced, not as desperate lovers clinging to the possibility of happiness, but as two individuals who had grown, healed, and chosen to intertwine their paths with full consciousness. Every step they took together afterward, through streets dusted with late snow, past cafes, markets, and streetlights glowing faintly against the early evening sky, carried a resonance that neither had experienced before: the subtle, persistent hum of trust, commitment, and the renewed capacity to feel without fear of ruin. In the months that followed, Ethan and Isabelle built a life that honored both the fragility and the resilience of human connection. Their days were filled with quiet routines, shared meals, early morning walks, evenings spent reading or writing side by side. But these routines were infused with intention, choice, and the acknowledgement that the smallest moments often hold the deepest significance. Ethan discovered a new rhythm of living, one in which grief no longer dictated the terms of his existence, but memory informed his compassion and presence. He saw clearly that second chances are never about erasing the past. They are about learning from it, integrating its lessons, and allowing it to shape a life that is wiser, more sensitive, and more capable of authentic love. Isabelle, with her steady encouragement, laughter, and occasional mischievous teasing, became both companion and mirror, reflecting the parts of himself he had once thought lost, and nurturing the growth of the person he was becoming. Summer arrived with an unexpected warmth that seemed to mirror the shift in Ethan's own internal world. For the first time in years, he moved through the city feeling unhurried, fully inhabiting the streets, the cafes, the parks, the gentle chatter of life around him. With Isabelle by his side, he learned to savor moments rather than merely survive them. The taste of fresh bread in the morning, the smell of rain on hot asphalt, the subtle gestures of strangers whose presence he previously ignored. Their connection had matured beyond the thrill of novelty into a deep, steady intimacy, one that did not demand constant validation or dramatic demonstrations, but thrived in shared attention and quiet understanding. Ethan often reflected on the paradox of second chances, that love, when approached with openness and care, could restore not only companionship, but a sense of self that he had believed irretrievably lost. Each time he caught Isabelle's eye across a crowded room or felt the warmth of her hand in his, he was reminded that true transformation is incremental, cumulative, and sustained by countless small choices to trust, to engage, and to love despite the lingering shadows of past pain. One evening, they visited an old, nearly forgotten lakeside park, where the sun dipped low behind the trees and the water reflected the molten sky in ripples of gold and crimson. They walked along the edge of the lake in silence for long stretches, each absorbed in thought, yet comforted by the presence of the other. Ethan reflected on how radically his perception of life had shifted. Where he had once feared intimacy and distrusted joy, he now embraced both with an awareness that their fragility made them precious, not frightening. Isabelle spoke occasionally of her own fears and ambitions, never glossing over her vulnerability, and each revelation deepened his admiration and trust. He realized that the second chance he had been given was not merely romantic, it was existential. Love had guided him back into life itself, revealing dimensions of experience he had previously shut away, and teaching him that true fulfillment comes not from avoiding pain, but from cultivating the courage to feel fully, to act intentionally, and to inhabit the present with awareness, curiosity, and gratitude. As the seasons shifted, so did the depth of their bond. They began to explore shared projects. Ethan encouraged Isabelle's artistic pursuits, offering reflections without presumption, and she supported his writing with enthusiasm, listening patiently as he read passages aloud, dissected ideas, and wrestled with unfinished chapters. Their collaboration was gentle, organic, and marked by the mutual recognition that each individual's growth was inseparable from the strength of their connection. Ethan noticed the way his confidence expanded, not as arrogance or control, but as an internal steadiness that allowed him to take creative risks he had previously avoided, to express emotions openly without fear, and to engage with the world around him more fully. In quiet moments, he would pause and marvel at the transformation, from a man defined by fear, routine, and avoidance, to someone capable of embracing life with openness, passion, and a sense of purpose that he had thought impossible to recover. Isabelle's influence had not been coercive or miraculous. It had been consistent, attentive, and affirming, a steady mirror reflecting the courage he was only beginning to recognize in himself. One rainy night, as the city lights shimmered through misted windows and the world outside blurred into water-streaked impressions, Ethan and Isabelle sat together in his apartment, drinking tea and talking quietly. The conversation turned inevitably to the past, their losses, regrets, and the subtle ways life had shaped them both. Ethan admitted, with vulnerability he had long avoided, the depth of his fear, the weight of grief, and the way he had once believed he was incapable of starting again. Isabelle listened with unwavering patience, then shared her own moments of doubt and courage, illustrating how resilience is neither instantaneous nor dramatic, but a gradual cultivation of awareness, self-compassion, and commitment to growth. As they spoke, Ethan felt a profound realization settle in him. Love after loss does not erase pain, nor does it promise perfection. It offers something subtler, deeper, and infinitely more sustaining. The ability to engage fully with life, to honor both grief and joy, and to build a shared existence founded on trust, patience, and authenticity. With each passing day, Ethan noticed that the city itself seemed to resonate differently with him. The mundane, the hum of traffic, the smell of street food, the chatter of children in playgrounds, now carried texture, rhythm, and meaning. Isabelle's presence had trained his attention in subtle ways, helping him recognize that the extraordinary often resides within the ordinary, waiting to be perceived by eyes willing to notice. He began to write again with renewed intensity, capturing fragments of their life together, the quiet walks, the whispered jokes, the tender gestures. And in doing so, he realized that storytelling itself had become a vehicle for healing, for understanding, and for celebrating the fragile, luminous beauty of second chances. In Isabelle, he discovered not merely a partner, but a catalyst for awakening, a reflection of courage and empathy that inspired him to confront fear, honor vulnerability, and embrace life with intention rather than inertia. Their shared journey revealed that true love is not a single monumental event, but the accumulation of presence, patience, and the deliberate choice to nurture connection even amidst uncertainty. By the time autumn returned, Ethan could sense a profound transformation within himself. He no longer defined himself by loss or absence, nor by the cautious self-protection that had governed his early post-divorce years. Instead, he moved through life with a quiet steadiness, a capacity to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, and a willingness to act in alignment with his values rather than in reaction to fear. Isabelle remained beside him as both companion and mirror, offering a subtle yet persistent encouragement to inhabit life fully, to engage deeply with others, and to cultivate joy and meaning even when circumstances were uncertain. Their love had evolved into a steady current, not turbulent and fiery, but strong, sustaining, and capable of weathering challenges without faltering. In this new rhythm, Ethan discovered a freedom he had never known. Freedom from the tyranny of regret, freedom from the constant anticipation of loss, and freedom to build a life that was as emotionally rich and profoundly human as it was uncertain and unpredictable. Winter approached once more, casting long shadows across the city and painting rooftops with frost, but Ethan no longer felt the chill of isolation that had once haunted him. Instead, he experienced a sense of warmth that emanated from within, nurtured over months of conscious attention, trust, and shared presence with Isabelle. Their love had become a quiet force, resilient and sustaining, built on the delicate yet unshakable foundation of honesty, vulnerability, and mutual growth. Ethan found himself reflecting on the paradox of second chances. They require courage not only to love again, but to see oneself clearly, to confront the lingering ghosts of past disappointment, and to embrace the uncertainty of life with intentionality rather than fear. In Isabelle's presence, he had learned that true intimacy is not a rescue from pain, but a partnership in navigating it, and that the most profound transformations occur gradually, through countless small, deliberate moments of connection, reflection, and care. On a quiet afternoon, they walked along the riverbank, the water reflecting the muted winter sun like shards of glass, and Ethan realized how deeply his perspective on life had changed. He no longer measured days by survival alone, but by the quality of attention he brought to them. Noticing the subtle expressions on the faces of passers-by, the shifting light across frozen water, the gentle laughter of children echoing from distant playgrounds. Isabelle's influence was not dramatic or imposing. It was consistent, patient, and grounding, a mirror reflecting his capacity for hope, resilience, and authentic joy. Together, they shared dreams without fear of ridicule, laughter without pretense, and silences that spoke louder than words. Ethan understood that the most powerful form of love is not dependent on grand gestures, but on steady presence, shared attention, and the courage to allow oneself to feel fully, even after profound loss. One evening, sitting together on the balcony of their shared apartment, watching the city glow in the winter dusk, Ethan finally acknowledged the full scope of his transformation. He had come to understand that life does not offer second chances to erase the past, but to engage with it, learn from it, and build something stronger, more resilient, and more authentic than what came before. Isabelle rested her head on his shoulder, and in that simple, unspoken act, he felt the culmination of months of healing, trust, and careful cultivation of connection. The past was no longer a weight to bear but a teacher, guiding him toward choices informed by wisdom, compassion, and self-awareness. Every small gesture, every shared conversation, every quiet moment of vulnerability had accumulated into something profound, a love that did not erase grief, but expanded his capacity to live fully, courageously, and openly. As spring returned, painting the city with soft green and gold, Ethan and Isabelle began planning a future together, not as a solution to past pain, but as a continuation of their shared growth. Their conversations moved from daily routines to dreams, ambitions, and the subtle architecture of a life they wanted to build side by side. Ethan noticed, with gratitude, that he was no longer afraid of uncertainty. He had developed the capacity to navigate it gracefully, trusting both himself and Isabelle to act with integrity, patience, and love. Together, they explored new neighborhoods, attended art exhibits, and spent long afternoons in cafes writing, reading, and dreaming aloud. Each experience was imbued with intention, with the awareness that life's beauty emerges not in grand, climactic moments, but in the consistent, deliberate acts of engagement, presence, and care that form the texture of shared existence. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves in a small, hidden garden behind a restored museum, the earth damp beneath their feet and petals glistening with droplets. As they wandered together in silence, Ethan reflected on the magnitude of what had changed. He had stepped into this season of life still wounded, still cautious, and yet, through steady presence, conversation, and vulnerability, he had been allowed to rediscover the capacity to love, to hope, and to feel fully again. Isabelle did not ask him to hurry, to heal faster, or to perform joy. She merely walked beside him, reflecting back his courage and curiosity. In that quiet, shared space, Ethan realized that second chances are never about undoing the past, but about choosing life again, embracing possibility, and allowing oneself to be transformed by love that is patient, intentional, and authentic. Months turned into years, and the life they cultivated together became a testament to resilience, authenticity, and conscious choice. They faced challenges, professional setbacks, personal doubts, and the occasional tension that arises when two independent lives intertwine, but these moments never threatened the foundation of their relationship. Instead, they became opportunities to practice patience, communication, and mutual respect. Ethan often reflected on how profoundly Isabelle had changed not only his heart, but his perception of life itself. He had moved from a state of cautious survival to one of vibrant participation, where grief could coexist with joy and hope could flourish alongside memory. Their love was neither fleeting nor dramatic. It was steady, luminous, and enduring, a constant reminder that second chances require courage, commitment, and the willingness to inhabit life fully with another human being who sees you clearly and encourages your growth. On a quiet evening, standing together on the balcony as the city lights shimmered like scattered stars, Ethan realized that he had become someone he would have scarcely recognized in his past, a man capable of vulnerability, courage, joy, and intentional love. Isabelle rested her hand in his, and the warmth of their shared presence conveyed everything words could not. He understood, finally, that the essence of second chances lies not in erasing past sorrow, but in integrating it, in allowing grief, hope, memory, and desire to coexist, and in choosing, deliberately and consistently, to engage with life, love, and possibility. Their shared history, filled with quiet resilience and the careful tending of connection, had transformed both of them. What once seemed fragile had become profound. What once seemed impossible had become a living, breathing testament to the power of patience, trust, and the human capacity to heal. In the end, Ethan and Isabel's story was not marked by dramatic climaxes or sudden revelations, but by the slow, steady cultivation of love, trust, and presence. They had discovered that second chances are not gifts bestowed by circumstance, but rewards earned through courage, vulnerability, and conscious engagement with life. Every conversation, every shared silence, every tender gesture contributed to a life lived fully, rich with meaning, and infused with the profound awareness that love is strongest when it nurtures both the heart and the self. Ethan often thought back to the dark months following his divorce, marveling at the improbable journey that had brought him here, to a life infused with connection, joy, and the enduring certainty that, even after profound loss, the heart has the capacity to begin again, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more alive. And in Isabel's presence, he knew that he had not only found love, but the truest expression of life itself, a chance to live fully, courageously, and openly, alongside someone who had taught him to see both the beauty and the possibility in every single moment.